Aloha and welcome everyone. Can you hear me? Hey Nick, can you
Yes.
hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
So you got a special guest speaker today. Nick Warnoff is going to be talking about intro to real estate investing. So I'll go ahead and kick it off with Nick. His background, he was a rescue swimmer back in the day. And along the way, he discovered he could make more money off of real estate investing than his boss back at his squadron. So you have the floor, Nick.
Cool. Thank you so much. Yeah, I just wanted to give a brief intro to real estate investing, and you'll see why in a minute. It's very important to you as a real estate agent, whether you want to be an investor or a just an agent who represents buyers and sellers as is. Um, so anyway, if you have any questions, feel free to just type them in the chat and then we'll get to them afterwards. I'm just going to kind of roll through these pretty quickly. It's going to be broad concepts. We're not going to get into the weeds on anything specific, but if you want to dive into stuff, we can afterwards. And then later on, we can even make new presentations for those. So let's get started. Intro to real estate investing with me, Nicholas Warnoff. Like Zor said, I've been investing for a few years now here in San Diego. I did pretty well. I made more money in real estate while active duty than actually from my Navy income. So that was pretty cool. And now I'm starting to do it full time by continuing investing in real estate for myself by creating affordable houses for service members. But I also teach others how to invest in real estate as well. So this is a really good practice for me. And I thank you all for coming to attend this. So why does it matter to you? Even if you just want to be an agent, you're not interested in investing at all, you just want to represent buyers and sellers, investing in real estate is going to be very, very important to you as an agent. And please forgive my AI images. I thought they were hilarious, so I included them. That is not a real person. We didn't have any actual huge uniform regulation violations, as you're going to see in these images. They're all fake. So don't freak out if we have any chiefs on here and you see these uniform violations. Relax. All right. So first off, every home is at least partially an investment. Okay. So when you're representing a client, they're going to be somewhere on the spectrum. All right. Of this home is 100% for personal use, right? Versus this is an investment property. I'm not going to live there. I just want to rent this out and make some money. Okay. Everyone is typically going to be somewhere in the middle because homes have utility, but they also appreciate in value and can make money through other means as well. So even if you're working with a client who's just purchasing their first home, right, you want to be able to steer them towards a neighborhood that you know is going to appreciate well. And they're not going to have the same understanding of the market as you do as a realtor and a real estate professional. So understanding the principles of investment is going to help you out and also help your clients out. Okay. Over the course of however long they're in that house, however long they own it, if they own it for, say, the full term of the mortgage, right, you could make the difference of hundreds of thousands of dollars for them, which is huge. You could literally pay for their kids' college or give them the next big down payment on their dream home, right? So it's very important that you understand the principles of investing so you can help your clients invest in properties, whether they want to or not, whether they're just looking for a home to live in or they're looking for an investment property. All right, next, real estate investors are the best clients because they're your repeat clients. Okay, when you work with a real estate investor, they're not just going to purchase one house, right? If they purchase a house in a good market and that house performs well, they're going to keep coming back for more, especially if you're doing great as a real estate agent and sending them those good deals, those good cash flowing properties, because you understand what market's cash flow, what rent to price ratio is, what markets are appreciating, and essentially where the hot properties are. So that can make you hundreds of thousands of dollars if you're representing very active investors, and they're out there. Next, your own personal wealth and credibility. So as a real estate agent, you want to walk the walk if you're going to talk the talk. Okay. If you're out there telling people that your home is an asset, that you can save thousands of dollars over the course of a year paying into a home versus renting, Okay. You want to be able to do that, right? You want to be able to demonstrate to future homeowners and investors that you understand the process so much that you put your own money at risk. So it's a huge, huge addition to your credibility and your personal wealth. As a realtor, you're going to know more about your local community and your local economic conditions than most, which is going to give you a huge leg up in investing in the local market. So take that into account as well. Any money you make, it's going to behoove you to put it right back into real estate. Okay. All right. So what is investing? All right. It's very broad. It can be kind of confusing. So I went and asked the most intelligent non-person I know, ChatGPT, to break it down. And it came up with real estate investing involves the purchase, ownership, management, rental, or sale of real estate for profit. Okay. It's a substantial component of the investment world and can be a means to generate passive income, build wealth, and diversify an investment portfolio. All good things. Okay. Basically, real estate investing is buying property to make money. Okay. Spending a little bit of money now to make a lot of money in the future. All right. And as we're going to go over, it can be one of the most profitable forms of investing that anyone, I mean, it's made more millionaires than any other form. So it's got to be the best, right? In my opinion, it is, but that's debatable. All right. So there's two main types of real estate investing, residential and commercial. Now we're going to go more into residential because commercial is kind of its own can of worms, and it's much more difficult to get into really. But they're both very viable forms of making long-term investments. All right. Residential consists of homes of 4 units or less. They're typically eligible for better financing because we have programs like the FHA loan, the VA loan, things like that that can lower your interest rate and lower your initial down payment. All right. And it often requires much less startup costs. The example of that, or the exception to that, would be if you're trying to buy a single family home in, say, San Diego, where single family homes are well over $1 million, versus buying a commercial property in Arkansas, where you can buy a full-on gas station for less than 100 grand. So there are exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, it requires much less startup money to start in residential properties. Now, for commercial properties, all right, that's going to be any property that's used for commercial use. Okay, so storefronts, transit or transportation companies, any kind of business operating that isn't an industrial type of business. All right. And any kind of residence that is 4 units or more. Okay. So apartment buildings. Now, to get started in commercial investing, you're going to need a significantly higher down payment. Those down payments are typically 25% or more. Okay. And it's going to have a little bit higher interest rates. Okay. And that's because it's essentially much easier to declare bankruptcy when you're a business versus personal. And so banks aren't as willing to take a steeper risk. Okay. But again, that's kind of its own can of worms. We might create another PowerPoint on commercial investing later. All right. Important terms to know to understand everything about this PowerPoint. Okay. Appreciation versus depreciation. All right. Appreciation is when things increase in value. Depreciation is when things decrease in value, which surprisingly, depreciation isn't always a bad thing, actually. And we'll go into why that is in a second. All right, here's a couple examples. My home value has appreciated $100,000 in the last 5 years. If I sell today, I could make 150 grand towards my next down payment. Okay, so they had a great real estate agent that put them in a favorable market. The value increased by 100 grand in 5 years, which is not unheard of at all. If you have bought homes in San Diego in the last few years, you've seen more than that. All right. And so now they've passively made $100,000, $150,000 if we include the equity they built. So yeah, real estate can be hugely profitable if you play the game right. This isn't an unreal example at all, or an unrealistic example at all. All right, next, my accountant says my rental property has depreciated $2,700 this year, and I can write it off as a tax deduction. That's also a very real example. Okay, when you are filing your taxes, you can write off the lost value on your rental properties. Okay, so if you estimate that the home has lost value of say $2,700, you can now deduct that off your taxes and decrease how much you pay. Now, I'm not a CPA, okay? I can't legally tell you about how much that is, but if you work with an accountant, they will, and it can save you thousands of dollars in taxes or save your clients thousands of dollars in taxes. So one more thing to take into account. All right. And it's an example of how depreciation can actually be a good thing. All right. Leverage. If you understand this reference, you can be my friend. All right. Leverage is using borrowed capital to increase the potential return on an investment. Okay. So here's an example right here. I leveraged my VA loan to put $0 down on a 4-unit apartment complex and made $1,000 per month in rental income. Okay. So they were able to use that VA loan, something that costs them nearly nothing, right? When you get a VA loan, you don't have to put any money towards the down payment of the home, but you'll still have to buy the appraisal, or you'll have to pay for the appraisal and you'll have to pay for the inspection. So there's some money out of pocket. And if you're going to rent the property out, you might also have to put in some money into the rehab. So you could put like $2,000 down, however much it takes to come into ownership of the home and how much it takes to create a rentable property, right? You'll have some money out of pocket, but because you are borrowing money, okay, you're able to turn that $2,000 or however much you had to take out of pocket, and you're going to turn it into much more money, right? So my first property, it cost me $1,500 out of pocket to obtain. And then I was able to fix it up, luckily, with just sweat equity. I made that money back in the first month of rental income. So that's an example of leverage. I was able to turn $1,500 into literally $100,000 later on. Okay, so a better example would be say putting 20% down on a $100,000 house, so $20,000, and then holding it for the length of the loan, so 30 years, right? So you were able to make $100,000 in the principal with only $20,000 down. Okay, so that's leverage. All right, net operating income. All right, often abbreviated as NOI, is the key metric used in real estate to measure the profitability of an income-producing property. It represents the annual revenue from a property after all operating expenses have been deducted, but before accounting for mortgage payments, taxes, and interest. So your PITI, okay, or PITI. Okay, basically, it's how well the property is performing without the mortgage. Okay, that is that's a very key thing to understand, is that NOI and profit are not the same thing. Okay, because it takes out some very key parts. All right, next is cap rate. All right, cap rate is essentially your NOI divided by the market value. Okay, and that is going to give you a metric over how the property is performing compared to its value. Okay, so typically used in commercial investing, but also used in residential investing. All right, it judges the performance and risk of a property. Okay, the higher the cap rate means the more money it's making, which is good, but it is normally also indicative of higher risk. So if you hear about really high cap rates, they're normally in Class D type neighborhoods. Okay, and there's a lot of risk that typically gets taken on in those type of neighborhoods because your tenants are less likely to pay. You might have an eviction, that type of thing. Okay. Versus lower cap rate, you don't make as much money, but typically those are in your Class B or Type A neighborhoods, and your payments are going to be much more regular. A typically acceptable cap rate is going to be about 4 or 5%. Over 5%, you're either looking at a great investment or a really risky investment. Okay, below 4%, it better be really safe or it's just a terrible investment. Okay. All right, cash on cash return. This is my favorite. This is how I look at investment properties. Okay, it is the annual cash flow divided by the total cash invested. So if I invest, say, $20,000 in a home, and Over the next year, I collect $10,000 in rental income. That means I had a 50% cash on cash return. Okay. Or excuse me, I got $10,000 in cash flow. Okay. Meaning total profits. I gained $10,000 when I invested 20. That means I got 50% cash on cash return. A 50% cash on cash return in the first year of owning an investment property is fantastic. Now, where you will see amazing cash on cash returns is when you use your VA loan, or your clients use their VA loans, because they're putting next to no money down. They're only paying for the appraisal, inspection, and the rehab. And so you'll get people who put almost nothing down and then rent out 2 or 3 units in a fourplex, and their cash on cash return is like 600%. You can get amazing numbers. Typically, a good cash on cash return you're going to get is going to be about 5 to 10% is a good cash on cash return of a stable investment. All right, here is an example and another Jack Sparrow reference. Because I used my VA loan for leverage, I was able to purchase $1 million property with only $1,200 upfront invested. A very real thing. I've seen people do this. All right, the property then cash flowed for $100 per month. Okay, so $1,200 per year, making my cash on cash return 100%. Okay, so if you don't understand that math, we can hit it up again at the end of the PowerPoint. All right. And here's another example. I was looking at a duplex with an awesome cap rate, but it was in a D-class neighborhood, and the 7% interest rate killed the cash flow. Okay, so basically, it was in a rough neighborhood. They didn't want to take on the risk, and the cash flow, or the high interest rates that we're seeing in today's market pretty much negated any cash flow. And then I was able to maximize my NOI by managing the profit myself, or managing the property myself. So they were able to decrease their operating expenses, okay, and thus increase their NOI by just doing some of the work themselves. All right. How do real estate investments make money? Okay, this is going to be the part where I'm hoping most of you pay attention. All right, the first is appreciation. So let's say you buy a property worth $100,000, okay, and then someone builds a shopping mall nearby, or they install a school nearby, or they put in an Amazon warehouse. Those things are going up everywhere right now. That would increase the appreciation of that property significantly, because there's going to be more people moving to that area, thus a higher demand for that land. Okay. Now, typically we see nationwide, all right, appreciation of about 5% annually. Okay. So if you look at pretty much any block of time of 30 years or more for the past 100 years, or really since America has been a country and actually kept track of real estate values, you see values increase on about 5% on average. Okay, so that's typically for long-term investing the appreciation that you can expect. Okay, now there's also forced appreciation. Okay, that is when you take a home and you modify it, say add on an additional dwelling unit, fix it up after it's been neglected after long periods of time, repaint it, knock out walls. That's the kind of work that you see flippers do, or the people on HGTV. Okay, that's called forced appreciation. And that's another thing you can do as an investor. Okay, so this is a graph taken from Fred of the national appreciation. Okay, so it's the median sales price of houses, okay, over the last 9 years. All right, and as you can see, we saw a pretty decent increase after the crash in 2009. We saw a massive increase when interest rates were down at like 2.5%. And now we're in a bit of a slump now. We're in a correction after those massive those massive drops in interest rates, and then massive increases, in interest rates. So you see a little bit of a slump here. But that's important to note, because when we look at some micro markets or some smaller markets, we still see appreciation. Okay, so don't think that, oh, just because national real estate values are down, you can't find properties that do appreciate. No, there are still markets out there that are appreciating in value. This one happens to be Chattanooga, Tennessee. And it's been doing fantastic despite the national decline in the median home value sales or median home value. So don't think that just because as a country the median home value is decreasing, that you can't find houses that are still appreciating, okay, for your clients. There could be a new Amazon warehouse being built nearby. There could be good schools that shelter it. There could be, like in San Diego, a biotech company moving in nearby that is increasing the home values. So you can still find good appreciating homes, okay? Next is cash flow, and cash flow is king, okay? Most investors invest for cash flow. So essentially what cash flow is your revenue minus expenses, okay? So how much money you get for renting out the property minus how much you pay in principal, interest, taxes, insurance, okay, maintenance, mortgage insurance, anything that costs that property money, okay? And it could also be any way that property makes money. So you could rent out a storage unit. You could rent out a parking spot in addition to renting out, say, the house for people to live in. So you can also make money that way. But yeah, cash flow is king. Another word for it is just profit. Okay. Here is an example of an actual graph. All right. You see here, we have $3,400 income monthly. All right. And then our expenses are $3,151. That leaves $248 per month in profit. Okay. Or cash flow, as we like to call it. That makes our cash on cash return. If we spent about $20,000 down, that makes it 8.49%. Okay. So as you see right here in this graph, the green represents our income. The orange is our expenses. All right. And then the black is the cash on cash return, or the, excuse me, that's the monthly cash flow. Okay. You'll notice the green increases a lot faster than the expenses. And that's important because your expenses stay about the same because your mortgage payment, if you have a fixed rate loan, doesn't increase. However, rents tend to go up over time. So you can assume that your monthly cash flow is going to increase, okay, as the loan matures. So this is just a 30-year period, all right? Here is pretty much that same thing, but in a spreadsheet format, okay? Next is loan amortization. Loan amortization is just a fancy word for, or fancy way of saying loan pay down. All right. So it's kind of like putting money in your piggy bank. All right. You're going to be paying the mortgage company, say $1,000 per month. And depending on your interest rate, a big chunk of that is going towards the interest payment. Okay. So say if you have a 7.5% interest rate, that could be, say, $600 of that $1,000. Then you're going to have a chunk of that going towards interest, and then taxes and insurance. Okay, what's left over goes towards the principal. Okay, and that is essentially buying equity in the house. Okay, so over time, all right, you're going to see the equity portion, or this Carolina blue line right here, all right, increasing. All right, and you'll notice it gets steeper and steeper. Okay, that's because over time, you start to pay down more and more a percentage of the principal versus towards the interest. Okay. So as you can see, it is inverse to the loan balance. So loan balance goes down over time, equity increases over time. All right. And it is directly proportional to the property value. So eventually they will meet. All right. And you will own the house outright. This is an example of a 30-year mortgage amortization. As you can see, it starts out in the negatives because you had to borrow money to buy it, and there was a let's say you financed your loan into you financed your closing costs into the loan, right? So you start out at, say, negative 18K. After the first year, you go 9K, all right, and then it starts increasing and you gain more and more equity in the house. Okay. All right. Now we're going to quickly sum everything up and then we can break for questions. All right. What is real estate investing? Real estate investing is purchasing property to make money. Okay. Real estate investor terms. NOI, net operating expense, or net operating income, is income minus expenses except for the mortgage. Okay, so that's to include principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. All right, next we have cap rate. That is the non-operating net operating income divided by market value. A quick way of analyzing property performance without the mortgage. Cash on cash return is the annual cash flow divided by the total cash invested, or a quick way of determining the overall performance of the investment. Okay, so seeing how well your money is performing in the investment. All right. How does real estate make money? Oh, and the biggest difference between cap rate and cash on cash return, cap rate does not include the mortgage, cash on cash return does. Okay, so that's the key difference between those two metrics. All right. Next, how does real estate make money? Appreciation, cash flow, and amortization. Okay, those three big tenets. Now, we left one big one off, and that is tax sheltering. Okay, because it's a can of worms that I really don't want to open. It is, we could talk about that all day. We went into it a little bit when we talked about depreciation, because that's a great tax strategy to save you in taxes. But we could make an entire PowerPoint slide about tax strategies. But it would take another 30 minutes. And quite honestly, I'm not a CPA. So that one is best left to them. All right. All right. Any questions? Do we have any in the group? Let's see. Let me pull up the chat here. Oh, nope. No questions.
I actually have a question.
Okay. What's up?
So when you were talking about what was it? If you were to use the VA loan to purchase the house, you said it would be 0% down. How much does it usually cost for like the inspection and all that?
So that can vary greatly depending on where you live. So San Diego right now, the going rate is about $1,500.
Okay.
If I just had one inspected in Florida, for example, and that one was $800. So it can vary wildly.
So you said it would so I'm pretty new to this. So it's the inspection and what else?
You're also going to have to get an appraisal.
An
Okay.
appraisal?
So,
Okay.
yep. So the inspection can also differ based on what kind of financing you're getting, as well as the appraisal. So if you get an FHA loan, for example, you're going to need what's called a 4-point inspection. You might also, depending on what state you're investing in, need a wind mitigation inspection. Say if it's like Florida, for example, where they have hurricanes. So yeah, there's a lot of different types of inspections, and it could cost anywhere between $400 to $1,500. Now your appraisal is kind of like an inspection, but it's ordered by the bank. And so what the bank is doing is they're ensuring that their money is protected. So you pay for it, but the bank is the one essentially making sure it gets done, and they're the ones ordering it. It's for the bank, not you. Okay. And essentially what they're saying is we're going to loan money. Excuse me. We're going to loan money for this person to buy this home. We want to make sure that we immediately don't go in the negatives, and that if they, for some reason, default on the loan and we have to sell this property, we don't lose a lot of money. That's essentially why the appraisal's there. The appraisal can oftentimes make or break a deal, because if it comes in negative, the bank might not loan. But appraisals are also very subjective, especially right now where we're seeing markets with extremely tight inventory. The way they make an appraisal is they compare it to other properties that have sold recently. Okay. And they essentially create an evaluation based on the condition of the property, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms it has, essentially how valuable the land is, everything that goes into it. if it's in an area where not a lot of properties have been sold recently, that can be extremely difficult to do. And so as of right now, we're seeing very slow sales, right? Especially here in San Diego. And so we're seeing pretty big variances between appraisals on properties. So sometimes if if an appraisal doesn't go well with one appraiser, you can just try again, and maybe another appraisal will have another appraiser will have a different opinion. But that is organized 100% through the bank. And say if you get a VA loan, for example, and you order an appraiser, you don't get any say in what appraiser shows up. So the VA is going to choose one for you, and they could be a good one, they could be a terrible one. It's really kind of a crapshoot, to be honest. But it's a part of it. It's a part of the process. Did I cover your question there?
Yes, sir. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh yeah, of course. All right. When you hit NOI again. All right. NOI is net operating income. Let's go back. All right. So NOI is essentially used in cap rates. That's what NOI is. That's why we calculate that. It's because we want to see how much money it's making, okay, regardless of how it's financed, okay? Because financing can change over time, and financing doesn't really tell the story of the property itself, or excuse me, if you were to include financing, it wouldn't really tell the story of how the property is performing by itself, okay? Because if you got different financing terms, then the property might be making a ton of money, okay? So it's kind of the reason it's used a lot in the sale is because you're going to get different financing rates between different buyers and sellers, right? So there's a lot of people out there right now with like 2.5% interest rates, right? Because we had that massive drop during COVID. And so there's a lot of people out there sitting on like 2.5, 3% interest, right? When they sell, say, me a property and I go apply for conventional financing, I'm not going to get that same 2.5%. Okay. And so what NOI does is it allows us to see how the property is performing. All right. Regardless of who the owner is and how it's financed. So if we look at a single family residence with an NOI, or excuse me, with a cap rate of like 5, right? That cap rate doesn't change between two different people owning two different mortgages. The cap rate stays the same unless they make significant changes to it themselves. Okay, does that kind of cover it, Kenny? Oh, no. Okay, cool. Any other questions?
Yeah, Nicholas, have you maybe a personal question, but do you use the VA loan for all of yours? Like, are you allowed to use the VA loan more than once? Like, how does that work?
So I've used the VA loan twice now. The short answer is yes, you can use your VA loan, but you only have so many benefits, okay? And there's also restrictions on how often you can use it, all right? So if you use your VA loan, there's no cap on how much you can borrow, all right? That's only going to be limited by your income, all right? So I've seen, we had a E5 Marine here in San Diego buy an apartment complex for $1 million, an E5. All right. Now I am an E5 actually, still active duty technically. Yeah, we don't make enough money to afford $1 million home. Okay. But the way he was able to do it was by including the rental income, all right, of those 3 units. It was a 4-plex. So he included rental income in 3 of the units, and then he lived in the 4th. Okay. So that's a requirement of the VA loan. It can be used in residential properties, so up to 4 units. All right. But it's going to be based on your expected income. So whatever your W-2 income is from, say, the Navy, or if you have a part-time job or whatever, and whatever the rental income is. Okay. Now, you will be expected to have that as your primary residence for at least 1 year. Okay, so you're not going to be able to use the VA loan over and over and over infinitely. All right, you'll be able to use it essentially once per year. Once that year is up, if you want to reuse your VA loan, you're going to have limited benefits if you keep that first property financed through your VA loan. Okay, because they'll only insure you up to so much. Right? What the VA loan is, they're not lending you money. They're insuring you essentially for the banks. They're saying like, I will pay this person's mortgage if they default on the loan. Okay, that's what the VA is doing. That's how they wipe out that typically 20% down that's required by the bank to finance a home. Is they're vouching for the service member, saying like, hey, if he doesn't pay, I will. Okay, and that's why the bank is willing to take on that extra risk. All right, the VA will only do that so much though. All right, so the way you can get around that is by either A, selling that first property, or B, refinancing it. So if you, let's say you buy a home in San Diego for some reason, right? And you have it, you bought it for $1 million, okay, and it appreciates wildly. And somehow in 2 years, you get 20% equity increase in the house. So was worth $1 million. Now it's worth $1.2 million. Now you can convert it to conventional financing. Okay. And you get your entirety of VA benefits back. Okay. So now you can use your VA loan again to purchase another property. All right. And the way historically that people have made a lot of money reusing their VA loans is by just purchasing properties, excuse me, as they PCS through their military career. So let's say you get stationed in San Diego to start with, and then you get stationed in Norfolk. Well, you get to use your VA loan again. All right. And now you can buy another property with zero down in Norfolk. Well, let's say you then get stationed in Jacksonville. Guess what? Your VA loan's been renewed. You can purchase another property down in Jacksonville. Okay. So you just keep doing that wherever you PCS. So you go back to San Diego, you buy another property. I know literally a couple millionaires. They retired after 10 years in the military, just doing that. After 3 tours, I mean, yeah, they essentially walked away with a ton of money, which is awesome. Good on them. Did that cover it?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks.
Yep, no worries. Okay, so hit NOI. Sorry, I don't have my microphone with me today. I've always been a big believer in 30-year fixed rates. Yep. Mortgages for investing because they are stable loans. However, the rate's over 7% now. Any thoughts on using interest-only loans with the intent to refinance within a 3 to 5 year time frame? Ooh, that is a question for a lender. I've seen a lot of very creative financing methods in the last few months because interest rates are so high and it's becoming extremely difficult to find any properties left that cash flow after 7% interest. I will say that it depends on the state because different states have different laws over how much an interest rate can increase or decrease. Okay, so I think in California, it's I believe it's 2% per year, and it's capped at like 10% over what you originally borrowed at. So you can only increase it by so much, but that's still pretty huge. Imagining you had like a 14 or 17% interest rate, over time. Yeah, that's another can of worms that we could go into. That would be an entirely new presentation. That's a very different strategy. It's a bit risky because if you don't put significant money into the property and then you have to refinance years later, well, if interest rates have increased over the next 2 years, that means your property's value has likely decreased. So now you're forced to refinance on a home that's worth less. So it's a bit risky. I would be very interested to see how that pans out and if there's any if there's any spreadsheets or anything that can predict that. it's adding a considerable amount of risk to the property for sure. All right, next is caveat to the question. I'm seeing creative finance interest only loans around 3%. Yep. That has been a thing. If you look in the MLS right now and you search for creative financing or interest only, seller carry, sub 2, there's a lot going on right now because people are trying to either hold on to those extremely low finance loans or they're trying to get money for them. You know, if people have a property out there where they have, say, a 2.5% interest loan, they'll say, hey, you can buy this property from me, but I want $100,000 down, and then we're gonna have like a balloon payment in 5 years. So they're getting more money from it typically, but they're also selling it. So that's another PowerPoint that we could make. I love creative financing. It's amazing. If you guys don't know who Pace Morby is, I really encourage you to Google him. Watch his fantastic YouTube videos on Sub 2. They're a phenomenal resource. Next, do you personally use the VA loan once a year? I've used the VA loan twice in 2 years. So I wouldn't say once a year, but the difficulty with using the VA loan now for me is my W-2 income is pretty much non-existent. So all my income comes from real estate. And so, yeah, proving that I have that income is difficult. So I'm using alternative financing methods. All right. Yes, for sure. Lender question. Agree with your risk increasing rates. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. Nicholas, have you rented out any of your homes? Yes. I purchased a home a year ago and moving within 2 months and need advice on renting my home out. Can I reach out to you later? Of course, Elva. Yeah. I'll shoot you a DM right now. 364561282. Yep. Just shoot me a text sometime, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Cool. So is that all the questions for today? Anything else? Nope. Gonna close in 5, 4, 3, 2. All right. Thank you all so much for coming. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak here, and I'll see you next week. And Zor, he's on a plane now, but I'm sure he sends his regards. So have a great week.